Sometimes you have to lose everything to see what actually matters. The freezing wind clawed at the cracked windshield of the old Ford pickup as it idled at the edge of a Walmart parking lot. Jack Bennett leaned his forehead against the steering wheel, eyes closed, jaw tight. Outside snowflakes drifted sideways in the kind of wind that didn't care who it punished. In the back seat, his 10-year-old son Eli slept curled in a thrift store sleeping bag, cradling a tattered sketchbook like a teddy bear. The boy's breath fogged the window, his small frame twitching now and then, caught between dreams and cold reality. Jack hadn't slept in 3 nights. 3 days ago, he sold his last power drill for $20. 2 days ago, he poured the last of their change into the gas tank. Yesterday, he was denied a job stocking shelves at a place he'd once built from the ground up. Today, he had nothing but an empty wallet, a sleeping child, and 1 bar of signal on a cracked phone screen. A soft vibration buzzed in his hand. Another rejection email. "We regret to inform you." Jack didn't even finish reading. He knew how that sentence ended. It was the same as the last 17. He exhaled through clenched teeth, feeling like his ribcage might shatter. His life, 23 years of steady work, a mortgage, a wife, a yard with a busted grill, was now reduced to the rattling of a truck that could die at any second. And it was all his fault. When Sarah left, she took her toothbrush and the idea of we. What she left behind was weekends Eli's weekends. Jack promised her he'd figure it out, that he wasn't a lost cause, that he could still be the dad Eli needed. But as he looked around the cab at the half-eaten peanut butter sandwich on the dashboard and the bundle of unpaid bills shoved in the glove box, he couldn't help but wonder, what if I can't? A sudden cough from the back seat broke his spiral. Jack turned. Eli, stirred awake, rubbed his eyes and blinked sleepily at his father. "Is it morning?" Jack managed a tired smile. "Just about." "Did we make it?" the boy asked, voice hopeful. Jack hesitated. "Make it where, kid?" Almost he lied. Just waiting for the snow to let up. Eli nodded and sank back down, flipping open his sketchbook. Even in the cold, he still drew. Cabins, mostly. Big ones with stone chimneys and wraparound porches. Always in the woods. Always far from here. The boy didn't need toys or screen time. He needed roots. He needed walls that didn't move. Jack closed his eyes and tried to remember the last time his son had slept in a real bed. Then his phone buzzed again. He almost ignored it. But something about the number, a weird area code, piqued his curiosity. He tapped it open. A classified ad appeared in plain black text, no images. "For sale. Mountain cabin. $1. Cash 1930s. Build. Cedar Ridge near Leadville. Final sale. Mature buyer only. No negotiation. No financing. Call for appointment." Jack stared at the ad. It had to be a scam. No one sold a cabin for $1, especially not in Colorado. But something about it didn't read like a con. It read like a test. He clicked the contact number. The line rang twice. Then a woman answered, her voice firm but calm. "This is Martha. Hi. I'm calling about the ad." "Which one, the $1 cabin?" A pause. Then, "Do you have $1?" Jack blinked. "I do." "Then show up at my house in Cedar Ridge by sunset tomorrow. Bring your son. Don't be late." The line went dead. Jack stared at the phone, then at the sleeping boy in the back seat, then back to the ad. He looked out at the snow, the Walmart lights, the cheap plastic bags fluttering like flags of surrender. What do we have to lose, he thought. By the next afternoon, they were halfway up the winding roads of the Rockies, snow crunching beneath worn tires. The gas gauge hovered just above empty. Eli's face was glued to the window, marveling at pine forests that looked pulled from his own drawings. "What if it's like a real-life haunted cabin?" he asked. Jack chuckled. "Then we haunt it right back." They reached Cedar Ridge just as the sun began to dip. It wasn't a town so much as a scattering of clapboard buildings along a stretch of forgotten highway. People stared as they passed, some nodding. Others didn't bother hiding their skepticism. At a crooked blue house surrounded by a lopsided white fence, they found her Martha Whitlow. Silver hair tied in a scarf, blue flannel eyes sharp enough to cut glass. She stood on the porch holding a thick parchment, a brass key, and a cookie in a napkin. "You're late," she said, handing the cookie to Eli. "But not too late." Jack stepped out, unsure. "You're serious about this, $1?" she nodded. "Samuel built that cabin for people who had nothing. Said it only cost $1 to believe in second chances." He blinked. "Samuel." "My uncle," she said simply. "You'll learn about him soon enough." She handed Jack the key and a hand-drawn map. "Don't let the dust fool you. That place remembers everything." Jack unfolded a single-dollar bill from his pocket and handed it to her. She tucked it into a glass jar labeled Hope Fund. Smiled once, then disappeared inside. Eli grabbed his hand. "Can we go now?" Jack nodded. The cabin stood in a clearing by a frozen creek. Stone walls, steep roof, a chimney tall as a watchtower. The front door groaned open like a movie scene. Inside one large room, a stone fireplace, a broken rocking chair, and shafts of cold light piercing through dusty windows. Jack set their bags down. "Well, welcome home." Eli ran straight to the fireplace. "Can we light it?" "Let's try." They got it going with old wood and newspaper scraps. The fire lit the room in a flickering amber glow. Eli unrolled his sleeping bag, pulled out his sketchbook, and curled up beside the hearth. "Dad, I like it here," he said. "It feels like home." Jack looked at his son, then the glowing stone walls, the beams above the old dust and older silence. And for the first time in months, something settled inside his chest that didn't feel like failure. The fire burned low as Jack sat at the table, blueprints spread out before him like a puzzle missing half its pieces. The overhead bulb flickered with every gust of wind outside, casting long shadows that shifted across the walls. Eli was asleep on the floor nearby, curled up in his sleeping bag, beside the fireplace, clutching his sketchbook. Jack stared at the scrawled handwriting, beneath the blueprint's detailed lines for the children. 1938. Those words didn't feel symbolic anymore. Not after the journal. Not after the well. And not after the look on Martha Whitlow's face at the library. Who builds secret tunnels under a cabin in the woods. Who draws maps to buried compasses and leaves blueprints behind like breadcrumbs. Someone who's hiding something. Or someone. Jack's fingers ran along the edges of the paper. Beneath the hand-drawn cabin floor plan were faint outlines of rooms labeled Chamber A, Bunker East, Access Tunnel 2. Next to them, more handwriting. Only if danger closes in. If I disappear, the truth is buried here, he whispered to himself. Who the hell was this guy? A draft blew through the floorboards. Jack stood and walked to the fireplace where the stone had been pushed back into place. He ran his hands along the hearth, testing the seams between stones, tapping gently until his knuckles met hollow space again. The fireplace wasn't just for warmth. It was a door. He turned back toward the table and froze. The blueprint was gone. Eli. No answer. He crossed the room quickly and knelt beside the sleeping bag. Empty. The cabin door creaked open behind him. Jack spun around and saw Eli standing outside barefoot in the snow, holding the blueprint in both hands like a treasure map. Jack rushed to him. Eli, what the hell are you doing? Eli pointed into the trees, shivering, but smiling. I found something. Jack grabbed his jacket boots, crunching through snow. You could have frozen out here. Eli didn't hear the anger in his father's voice, only the thrill of discovery. The blueprint shows an outbuilding. It's labeled Storehouse A. It's right by the creek. I think it's real. Jack looked where Eli pointed. The moonlight illuminated the edge of the tree line. Snow had settled on a lopsided wooden structure, partially collapsed and almost invisible under years of brush. They moved toward it together. Jack yanked away vines, clearing the doorway. The frame was warped and the hinges groaned as he pushed the door open. Inside was a shallow space no larger than a shed. Rusted tools, cracked jars, collapsed shelves. But in the back corner, a circle of stones. A fire pit, Hibui. Jack stepped closer and noticed a metal ring embedded in the center. He reached down, gripped it, and pulled. The ring lifted a flat wooden hatch, revealing a steep shaft with a wooden ladder leading downward into darkness. The air that came up was cold but not stale. Eli, stay here, Jack said. No way, the boy replied. I'm going. Jack hesitated, then gave in. Fine, but stay behind me. He grabbed a flashlight from the cabin, and together they descended slowly. The ladder creaked, but held. About 15 feet down, the tunnel leveled out into a narrow corridor lined with stone and wooden beams. They stepped into the chamber. Jack swept the light across the space, wooden shelves, cobwebs, piles of cloth, and old blankets. In the center of the room sat a covered table. Jack peeled back the tarp, revealing books, journals, and a large brass and steel device. It looked like a small engine crossed with a telescope, gears, tubes, and valves meticulously crafted. Eli's mouth dropped open. What is it? Jack found a metal plate bolted to the device, Whitlow Water Purification Unit. Patent pending. 1937. He stepped back, heart pounding. This is it. This is what he was hiding. Eli circled it carefully. Why hide something that could help people? Jack didn't answer. His fingers flipped through the nearest notebook. Inside were diagrams, chemical formulas, and water filtration methods using natural materials, sand, charcoal, pressure valves. And then Samuel's handwriting. The government wants the rights. But this is not for profit. It's for the ones who drink from puddles, who die from water that kills. Eli picked up a photograph tucked inside the pages. It showed a group of children gathered around Samuel in front of the cabin, laughing, bundled in mismatched coats, some barefoot in the snow. The same fireplace behind them, the same walls. This wasn't treasure, Jack murmured, voice low, awe in his chest. It was protection. They spent the next hour carefully gathering everything they could carry, books, diagrams, letters. Eli tucked the photo into his sketchbook. Back at the cabin, they laid it all out in front of the fire. The purifier's brass components glinted in the glow. Jack's mind buzzed with questions and consequences. He knew what this was now. This wasn't just a story about a man in the 1930s who built a safe house. This was a suppressed invention, a humanitarian breakthrough buried because it refused to be sold. Jack read more entries. Samuel had been approached by a water conglomerate offering to purchase his designs. He refused. Then came military contractors, then threats. He wrote, If I disappear, let the machine speak for itself. Eli sat quietly sketching the purifier. He drew arrows, notes, ideas. Dad, he said softly, do you think we should finish it? Jack didn't answer right away. He looked at his son, at the machine, at the journal full of hopes too pure to survive the world Samuel lived in. Then he nodded. Yeah, I think that's exactly what we're supposed to do. The next morning they drove back into town. Not to hide this time, to understand. At the library, Martha wasn't alone. A man in uniform leaned against the front counter, arms crossed. Sheriff Tom Grady. Jack's stomach dropped. I heard you've been digging around in things that don't concern you, Grady said, voice flat. They concern me now, Jack replied, standing straighter. Grady stared him down. You're not from here, Jack. You don't know what kind of hornet's nest you're poking. Jack held up Samuel's journal. He wasn't crazy, he was silenced. Grady stepped forward, his eyes cold. Be real careful what you say next. Jack didn't flinch. You can threaten me, but you can't unbury the truth. Grady said nothing, but his jaw tightened. Martha stepped between them. That cabin's his now, she said calmly, and so is the responsibility. Grady turned and left without a word. Jack turned to Martha. Who else knows what Samuel built? She looked down at the machine's blueprint in Jack's hands and said, More people than you want, and fewer than you need. Jack didn't like the sound of that. As they walked back to the truck, Eli tugged at his sleeve. Dad, in the journal, there's another map. Jack looked. Another set of coordinates. Different from the cabin. Farther into the woods. Eli looked up. Do you think it leads to the rest of it? Jack stared at the numbers. I think it leads to everything. The cold clung to Jack's jacket as he and Eli stood at the edge of the forest, just beyond the cabin's clearing. The morning fog hung thick, turning trees into gray silhouettes. Jack held Samuel's journal open, double-checking the scribbled coordinates. The handwriting was jagged, as if written in haste, perhaps fear. You sure about this, Jack? Asked, his breath fogging. Eli nodded. The compass is in the backpack, and I marked every point on the map last night. I think it's real, Dad. It's not just another sketch. Jack gave him a half smile. I believe you. They set out, boots crunching through frost-covered leaves. The compass needle trembled at first, then steadied, pointing them northwest. Every few steps, Eli stopped to check the terrain against Samuel's map. A jagged pine. A stream bend. A granite outcrop. The landmarks lined up. Nearly an hour later, Eli froze mid-step. There, he whispered, pointing through the thinning mist. At the base of a hill overgrown with raspberry canes and tangled brush, stood a weathered well, half-hidden, forgotten, but unmistakably man-made. The stone was moss-covered, its wooden top splintered and caved in as if it had given up trying to hold back whatever it once guarded. Jack approached carefully. Stay behind me. He cleared the boards and peered down. Darkness stared back. No bucket, he muttered. Just rope and a hook. He tied their flashlight to the rope and lowered it slowly. The beam bounced along rough stone walls until it hit something solid about 30 feet down. The rope jerked. Jack pulled it up. The flashlight clinked against metal. Wrapped around it was a worn leather pouch. Eli's eyes widened. Is that Jack opened the pouch? Inside was a brass compass, aged but intact, its needle spinning slowly before locking north. And beneath it, a folded map sealed with red wax bearing Samuel's initials. Eli whispered, awestruck, "It's not just a compass, Dad. It's a map." Jack crouched beside him, gently breaking the wax seal. The map unfolded like a relic, faded but readable. It laid out a route from the well to a lightning-struck pine to a flat boulder carved with a symbol. The final stop, a marker stone with a notch. Jack looked at Eli. "Think you can find it?" Eli grinned. "I already did." They followed the map through the woods, stopping only when they reached a scorched pine tree standing crooked, split from lightning. From there, they counted 72 paces west. Eli insisted on doing it himself and reached a mossy boulder. Eli dropped to his knees and brushed the surface clean. A shallow, circular groove was carved into the top. Jack handed him the compass. Eli gently set it into the groove. A mechanical click echoed as if the forest itself had inhaled. The boulder shifted slightly. Jack leaned into it, pushing with his shoulder. With a grinding protest, the stone rolled just enough to reveal a hidden brass box embedded beneath it. He pried it loose and lifted it out. It was heavy and locked with a keyhole shaped like a compass needle. Eli looked up. "Do you think the compass is the key?" Jack aligned the compass with the keyhole. Another click. The box opened. Inside were photographs, more of Samuel with children, many taken at the cabin. There were letters from those same children, now adults, thanking him for giving them a second chance. At the bottom sat a sealed envelope labeled, "If this is found, my work is unfinished." Jack opened it carefully. The letter was in Samuel's hand, and the tone was solemn. "I have hidden not wealth, but a weapon against suffering, a purifier of water, one simple enough to rebuild, durable enough to outlast governments, but too dangerous for those who profit from thirst. They threatened me, tried to buy me. I refused. I fear what comes next. There are 3 parts to my legacy. The cabin was first. This is the second. The third lies where learning once lived." Eli whispered. "A school." Jack nodded slowly. "It has to be." He said he built for the children. He wasn't just hiding them, he was teaching them. They packed the box and made their way back to the cabin as the fog thinned. As they approached, Jack spotted movement by the porch. A figure. Not Martha. Not Sheriff Grady. Someone taller in a dark coat watching the cabin. Jack ducked behind a tree, pulling Eli close. "Stay quiet." But the figure didn't move toward the door. After a long minute, he turned and walked off into the trees, disappearing in the direction of the main road. Eli looked up, voice trembling. Was that the same guy from the SUV? Jack didn't answer, but his stomach sank. Back inside the cabin, Jack laid the contents of the box on the table next to the purifier. 3 parts, Samuel had said. 1, the invention itself. 2, the philosophy, the mission. 3, still missing. Jack sat down hard. "We're not the only ones looking." Eli nodded. "But we're the only ones trying to finish it." Later that night, as the fire flickered and shadows danced across the walls, Eli sketched everything they'd found. The compass, the boulder, the letters, the faces in the photographs. His pencil moved fast, heart in his fingertips. Jack watched his son steady, focused, more determined than any 10-year-old had a right to be. His chest swelled with pride than fear. What if this got them hurt? But then he remembered Samuel's words. This belongs to the children of the world who thirst. This wasn't just about a machine. It was about a promise. One buried, one broken, but still alive. Jack stood and walked to the bookshelf, searching. Samuel had been a planner. If there was a schoolhouse, there would be a reference. and he found it an old map of the Cedar Ridge region. Faded pencil marked a plot labeled Old Whitlow Schoolhouse, 1936, deep in the forest, west of the property line. "Gotcha," Jack muttered. The wind howled outside like a warning. But inside the fire burned steady. The path to the old schoolhouse was barely visible, swallowed by decades of brush pine needles and creeping ivy. Jack kept one hand on the map and the other on Eli's shoulder as they navigated the woods west of the cabin. The trees grew denser here, older. The forest felt quieter, like it was holding its breath. Eli paused beside a fallen log and pointed ahead. "That's it." Jack squinted through the trees. Half buried in the earth, a crumbling stone foundation peeked out beneath overgrowth. The roof was long gone, but part of the outer wall remained scarred with charred black lines, fire damage. They stepped carefully over cracked beams and scattered stone. This had once been something. Bigger than a shack. More structured than a barn. Jack walked to what looked like the front entryway and ran his hand along the scorched stone. Carved into the wall, faded but still legible, were the words, "Whitlow School for the Mountain Children, 1936. Eli brushed pine needles away from a ring of stones near the back of the ruin. "Is this another fire pit?" Jack knelt beside him and shook his head. "No. This one's different." He pulled away the stones, revealing a sealed wooden hatch, its edges blackened but intact. Together they pried it open. A rush of cold air wafted upward. Jack clicked on his flashlight and descended the ladder slowly. The air was dry, not musty, preserved. Eli followed closely behind. They reached a small underground room lined with wooden shelves, some half collapsed. But what caught Jack's eye was what sat in the center, a rectangular crate wrapped in oiled cloth, much like the blueprint bundle they'd found days earlier. Jack opened it slowly. Inside were books, dozens of them. Journals, manuals, scientific notebooks filled with detailed illustrations and handwritten formulas. But at the heart of the crate, cushioned in straw, sat a device unlike the earlier purifier. It was sleeker, more refined, polished brass and burnished steel. Tubes, filters, a pressure valve. It was a finished prototype. Eli leaned in, eyes wide. "It looks brand new." Jack turned the device over. A tag engraved into the base read, "Whitlow Water Purification Unit, Series 2. Final Design, 1937. There was also a small plaque fixed inside the crate, "To the brave souls who finish what I could not. This design must never be sold. It must never be owned. Water belongs to no one." Jack sat back on his heels. Everything Samuel had worked for. It had led to this. He whispered, "This wasn't treasure. It was protection." Eli gently picked up one of the journals. "Look at this. He tested it in Africa. There are notes here. Guinea, Liberia, even parts of India." Jack flipped through the entries. Samuel had sent early models to missionary groups, disaster relief camps, and orphanages. Letters were tucked between the pages, thank you notes from field workers, photos of smiling children, holding up cups of clear water. Jack swallowed hard. He was already saving lives. But if that's true, Eli asked, why haven't we ever heard of him? Jack didn't have an answer. Back at the cabin, they set up a makeshift workstation. Jack disassembled the Series 2 unit, carefully photographing every angle, every piece, while Eli scanned the journals with Martha's old printer they'd salvaged from the library storage. By nightfall, the table was covered with components, pages, and notes. The blueprint for a global solution. And then the knock came. Not at the door, on the window. Jack's head jerked up. A figure stood outside in the dark. He moved fast toward the door, grabbing the fireplace poker. But the door creaked open before he got there. "Easy," the figure said. "It's me, Sheriff Grady." Jack lowered the poker, but not his guard. "You always knock on windows like a serial killer," Grady stepped inside, eyeing the materials laid out. "You've been busy." Jack didn't respond. Grady looked down at the purifier and let out a slow breath. "That what I think it is. If you think it's the future," Jack said, "then yeah." Grady didn't smile. "You found his tech, his notes, all of it." Jack crossed his arms. "You already knew about it." Grady looked uncomfortable. "I knew enough to stay out of it. My father warned me when I was a kid. Told me to never ask too many questions about Samuel Whitlow. Said people came to town back then, men with suits, briefcases, threats. My dad said Samuel turned down money most men would have killed for. Maybe that's exactly what they did." Grady looked up. "You think someone killed him?" Jack nodded. "We found the letters, the threats, the patents he never filed, and now we're being watched." Grady's eyes darkened. "There's a black Suburban that's been around town. No plates. Parked near the gas station 3 nights in a row." Jack exhaled. "They know." Grady hesitated, then walked to the window. "You gonna try to sell it?" "No," Jack said. "We're going to finish what he started. We're going to make it public." Grady gave a short nod. "Then you better move fast." He turned to leave, then paused in the doorway. "You need a place to lay low for a while, head west. June Carter still runs that bookstore on Main. She might know more than I do. She was one of Samuel's kids, you know." Jack blinked. "She was in the photos." Grady nodded. "She was there the day they burned the schoolhouse." The next morning, Jack and Eli packed the purifier prototype, the journals, and scanned copies of every blueprint they had into a weathered duffel bag. Jack scribbled a note and taped it to the underside of the cabin table. "If anything happens to us, take this to the press." To the world, they left just before sunrise. Cedar Ridge looked different now, like a stage waiting for a story to finish playing out. They found June's bookstore tucked between a bakery and a boarded-up barber shop. The bell above the door chimed as they stepped inside. The smell of old paper and cinnamon drifted around them. Behind the counter sat a woman in her 70s, hair tied back, glasses perched on the edge of her nose. "You must be the Bennetts," she said before they spoke a word. Jack set the duffel bag on the counter and opened it halfway, just enough to show the purifier. June didn't flinch. "I remember that sound," she said. "The gears. He used to run it in the basement. Said one day it'd save more lives than any doctor ever could." Jack leaned in. "Can we trust you?" She met his eyes, steady and unshaken. "He saved me from a cage. Of course you can trust me." She led them into the back through a secret door hidden behind the travel section. A spiral staircase descended into darkness. As they stepped down, June whispered, "Samuel didn't just hide kids. He taught them to survive." The staircase groaned with age as Jack and Eli followed June Carter into the shadows beneath her bookstore. The spiral descent was tight, the walls lined with rough-cut stone and timber. A single bulb flickered overhead, swaying from a rusted chain. June didn't speak until they reached the bottom. The basement was wider than Jack expected. Workbenches lined the walls, covered in dusty tools, rusted clamps, and yellowing blueprints. On the far side stood a table with an old microfilm reader and a shelf of meticulously labeled files. Whitlow, Housing Whitlow, Engineering Whitlow, Testimonies. Jack turned slowly in place. "What is this?" June walked over to a desk and sat down. She gestured to a chair opposite her. This, she said, was where Samuel taught us about the world and how to fix it. Eli's eyes wandered. You were one of the kids. She nodded. I was 11 when I came to him. My parents were gone. The system tossed me between homes like a rag doll. Samuel found me digging through trash behind the post office. I thought he was a lunatic when he offered me a warm bed. Jack sat down, setting the duffel on the table between them. June looked at it without surprise. I take it you've found the Series 2 prototype. Jack unzipped the bag just enough for her to see the polished brass and steel. How did you know it still existed? Because I helped him build it, June said, voice steady. I wasn't just a student. Samuel taught us all something useful. One kid learned carpentry, another medicine. Me, I took to mechanics like a fish to water. Jack leaned in. So, what happened? Why did the world never hear about him? June's face hardened. Because the world didn't want to. Not the part that makes money off sickness. Samuel was weeks away from filing the full patent when the letters started coming. At first offers, millions, licensing deals, then threats, real ones. He built the school to keep us safe, but it only delayed what was coming. She stood and walked over to the microfilm cabinet. From it, she pulled a roll and placed it on the reader. A newspaper article flickered to life on the screen. Local schoolhouse destroyed in accidental fire. Arson not suspected. Eli squinted at the date. 1938. They said it was a chimney fire, June said. But there was no chimney. I was there that night. I heard the engine. The men didn't wear uniforms, but they were armed. They pulled Samuel out. That was the last I ever saw him. Jack's stomach turned. So they killed him. No one ever found a body, June said, but the message was clear. Stay quiet. Stay small. Eli sat down next to the purifier. But you didn't forget him. June smiled. Some legacies are bigger than the men who build them. Jack reached into the bag and pulled out Samuel's journal. There's a third site. He mentions a factory or a larger facility. Do you know where it is? June's eyes lit with something sharp. I do. She walked to the back corner of the room and returned with a weathered map. It was hand-drawn, the ink faded, but a red X marked a spot in the valley northwest of Cedar Ridge. Samuel called it the Vault. It was where he planned to mass-produce the purifier. Only a few of us ever saw it. Why there, seclusion, water access, and because no one was watching. Jack traced the valley outline with his finger. It was remote, deep in the mountain range. You're going to need gear, June said. And backup. That place, it was abandoned violently. Jack looked up. You think the people who burned the schoolhouse came back? June nodded. And if they didn't finish the job, they at least buried it. Eli looked between them. Then we dig it up. June chuckled. You've got fire in you, kid. Samuel would have liked you. She reached into a drawer and pulled out a small black box. Inside was a brass key and a folded piece of paper. What's this? Jack asked. Samuel left it with me. Told me to only give it to someone who came looking for the vault with pure intent. She handed it to him. That key opens something. I just don't know what. Jack accepted it with reverence. The next morning, Jack and Eli left Cedar Ridge before the sun broke over the peaks. The drive took them into rough terrain. Dirt roads turned to gravel. Gravel turned to ruts. Eventually, they left the truck behind and hiked the rest of the way on foot. The valley was eerily still. They followed the map through a narrow canyon until the walls opened to a flat clearing ringed with pines. In the center stood the ruins of an industrial facility, concrete foundations, twisted rebar, and steel beams jutting from the earth like bones. It had been a building once, maybe several. Now it was a graveyard. Eli walked beside the largest slab of crumbled concrete. A rusted sign lay half buried in the dirt. He wiped it clean. Whitlow Water Systems, R&D Division. Jack exhaled. This is it. They searched the ruins, careful not to disturb anything unstable. In one corner, partially buried under collapsed walls, Jack spotted a vault door, blast-proof, burned black. He climbed over debris and tried the handle. Sealed tight. Then he remembered the brass key. It slid in with a soft click. The vault door creaked open. Inside, a miracle waited. The walls were scorched. The shelving collapsed, but the contents remained sealed. Crates, melted files. But most of all, a network of notes scrawled on boards and taped to surfaces, diagrams and letters overlapping. Letters from the Red Cross. UNICEF. WHO. Pleading for access to the purifier. And in another pile, rejection notices. Cease and desist threats. Corporate memos from water conglomerates demanding Samuel cease operations or face litigation. And one envelope marked, "If this is my end, let it be my answer." Jack opened it. They offered money. I said no. They offered silence. I said no. They offered violence. I said nothing because the machine says everything. I built this for the child with mud in his cup, not for the man with gold in his throat. Eli stepped beside him, staring in awe. This isn't just a machine, he whispered. It's a revolution. Jack didn't respond. His eyes were fixed on the back wall where one last message had been scrawled in red paint. I choose to stand with the children of the world who die daily from preventable waterborne diseases. My invention will not be sold. He felt something shift inside him. Not fear, not pride. Duty. Eli looked up. What now, Jack turned, voice steady. We bring this into the light. Snow flurries began to fall as Jack and Eli made their way back through the canyon, their boots crunching over frost-bitten earth. The wind had picked up, whistling through the rock like a warning. Jack adjusted the duffel over his shoulder, its weight heavier now, not just with Samuel's blueprints and files, but with a sense of responsibility that burned deeper than anything he'd carried before. They reached the truck by mid-afternoon, breathless, chilled, but charged with purpose. Eli turned to him as they loaded up. Do you think they're still watching us? Jack looked toward the tree line. The wind bent the pines but revealed nothing. Still, the feeling hadn't left him since the encounter near the cabin, the man in the coat, the unmarked SUV. He didn't lie to his son. Yeah, he said. I think someone's been watching all along. They drove down the mountain in silence, the defroster humming against the windshield. The weight of what they had discovered pressed on Jack's chest. It was no longer a mystery or a legacy. It was a live wire. And somewhere out there, someone wanted it buried again. Back in Cedar Ridge, Jack parked behind the bookstore instead of out front. June opened the rear door before he even knocked. You found the vault, she said, more a statement than a question. Jack stepped inside, unzipping the duffel, just enough to reveal the burnt edges of Samuel's final message. June sat down slowly, her hand shaking as she traced the words on the folder. He built it. He really built it. And they came for him anyway. Jack nodded. He didn't bend. Not once. June's jaw clenched. Neither should we. Before he could respond, a knock rattled the front door of the store. June looked up. Keep everything out of sight. Jack closed the duffel and tucked it beneath a stack of antique atlases. June walked to the front and opened the door. It was Sheriff Grady. He stepped inside slowly, glancing around. Mind if I come in? He asked. You're already inside, June said flatly. Grady gave a dry smile and turned to Jack. We need to talk. Jack stepped forward, arms crossed. If this is another warning, no. Grady interrupted. This isn't a warning. It's a fact. You're digging up things that got people killed, Jack. You're digging up things that got people killed, Jack. Jack didn't blink. And now we know why. Samuel had something that could change the world. Change is expensive, Grady said, especially when it threatens people with a lot more power than either of us. June narrowed her eyes. You knew about the vault. Grady nodded. My father told me stories. He warned me to stay out of it. Said Samuel's invention was cursed because it worked, and because he wouldn't sell it. Eli stepped into the room, face pale but defiant. Then why are you here now? Grady sighed, rubbing the back of his neck. Because I saw the Suburban again, parked behind the diner this time. And this morning a guy in a suit started asking questions at the post office. Name, license plate, where you were staying. Jack's stomach clenched. They're closing in. Grady looked him in the eye. You still planning to go public, yeah? Jack said. Now more than ever. Grady nodded. Then you'll need a better plan than just uploading a video. You need witnesses, proof, credibility. June stood. There's one place left that still gives a damn about the truth. Jack tilted his head. She handed him a weathered envelope. Inside was a contact card, Denver Gazette, investigative desk, contact A. Voss. Alina Voss, June said. She was one of us, too. One of Samuel's orphans. He saved her when she was 6. She doesn't just tell stories, she exposes them. Jack stared at the card. You think she'll believe this? She won't need to believe, June replied. She'll remember. That night, Jack sat by the cabin fireplace watching Eli sketch by the glow of the flames. He wasn't drawing cabins or forests anymore. He was drawing the purifier. Not as it was, but as it could be portable, simple scaled for homes and schools. Eli held up the page. If we make it this size, it could fit in disaster kits. People could use it anywhere. Jack studied the sketch. You're thinking like Samuel. Eli grinned. I think he'd want us to. Jack exhaled and stood. Then we take this to Denver tomorrow. They left before sunrise, the duffel packed tight with documents, prototypes, and hope. The road out of Cedar Ridge felt different this time, less like an escape, more like a charge forward. Denver sprawled before them by late afternoon, sharp lines and steel towers the opposite of the woods they'd left behind. Jack drove straight to the Gazette headquarters downtown and asked for Alina Voss at the front desk. The receptionist blinked. She doesn't usually take walk-ins. Tell her Samuel Whitlow sent us. She disappeared into the back. 10 minutes later, a woman in her 40s emerged. Shoulder-length black hair, sharp cheekbones, eyes that had seen things. She looked at Jack, then Eli, then the duffel. Her voice was calm but precise. You found it, didn't you? Jack nodded. Everything. She led them into her office and locked the door behind her. Over the next hour, Jack and Eli laid out the purifier, the letters, the journal, the photos. Alina barely spoke. Her hands trembled when she held the photograph of Samuel with a group of children. She pointed to a little girl in the back, missing her front teeth. "That's me," she whispered. By the end, her voice was steel. "We run this," she said. "Full spread, front page. But we do it right. That means verifying the designs, interviewing you, Martha June. We release the files and the footage together. No more shadows." Jack exhaled the first full breath he'd taken in days. "Thank you." But as they left the building, Jack's phone buzzed. Unknown number. No message. Just a photo. A snapshot of the cabin, taken from the woods. The angle was recent. Jack's blood ran cold. He turned to Eli, shielding his voice. "We've been followed." They drove fast out of the city, looping twice through traffic, checking mirrors. No tail. But Jack knew. This wasn't over. The truth was waking up, and the men who buried it weren't going to let it rise easily. Back at the cabin, they found the porch light smashed. The door slightly ajar. Inside, nothing was taken, but someone had been there. On the kitchen table sat a single bullet. And a note, "Stay quiet, stay alive." Eli stared at it. Lips parted. Jack walked to the fireplace, clenched his fists, and whispered more to himself than anyone, "They're afraid. That means we're close." That. Jack held the note between his fingers as if it might combust. The paper was thin, torn at the edges, and smelled faintly of motor oil. The single bullet it had been paired with sat heavy on the kitchen table, blunt cold and unmistakably deliberate. "Stay quiet. Stay alive." Eli stood silently across from him, backpack half-zipped, his hands frozen in mid-motion. "They came inside," he finally asked. Jack nodded. "They didn't steal anything. Didn't break much. Just enough to say, 'We see you.'" Eli looked down at the bullet, then back at his father. "Are we still going to finish this?" Jack met his eyes. Now more than ever. They spent the next hour checking everything: files, devices, drives. Nothing had been touched. Whoever had come, they weren't looking for something to take. They were delivering a message. Jack picked up the purifier from the table and moved it back to the basement. He hid the journals beneath a loose floorboard and placed Samuel's blueprints inside a hollowed-out compartment in the cabin's old dresser, then locked it with a brass key June had given him days before. He turned to Eli, who hadn't said a word since. "You okay?" Eli nodded, but his voice was thin. "I just thought when we found something good, the world would be happy." Jack crouched beside him. "Not everyone wants the world fixed. Some people profit from it staying broken." Eli stared at the floor, then whispered, "Then I hope we break everything they built." That night, Jack barely slept. He sat by the fire, going over every move they'd made, every person they'd spoken to. Alina was already working on the story he'd called to confirm. She was sending her team up to interview June, Martha, even Grady. The wheels were in motion. But the message had changed things. They weren't just dealing with silence anymore. They were dealing with sabotage. By morning, Jack had a plan. He called Grady first. The sheriff answered on the second ring, his voice groggy. "I figured this was coming." Jack didn't waste time. "Can you watch the cabin?" Grady didn't ask why. "Yeah, I'll be there in an hour." Next, Jack called Alina. "I need to disappear for a few days," he said. "Long enough to make sure this thing can't be buried again." She hesitated, then replied, "I can delay the release 72 hours. But once it's out there, there's no pulling it back." "Good," Jack said. "That's all the time we need." Jack and Eli loaded the truck. Not just with the purifier, but a scaled-down model they'd built from spare parts over the last 2 days. They had enough documentation, video footage, and scanned materials to back every claim. The plan was simple. If anything happened to them, the prototype and the data would go to 5 different contacts Alina had already arranged: scientists, humanitarians, and whistleblower networks. They drove through back roads, avoiding highways, switching routes 3 times. The last stop was a small repair garage on the edge of a town called Redstone. It looked abandoned, but the lights inside flickered on when Jack knocked twice. A man opened the door. He was lean, late 50s with oil-streaked hands and a mechanic's coverall. "You Bennett?" he asked. Jack nodded. "Alina sent us." The man stepped aside. "Get in before someone sees." Inside the garage was cluttered but organized tools hung from walls, car parts stacked like puzzle pieces, and an old wood stove hissed in the corner. At the back stood a bench with a military-style footlocker. Jack placed the prototype on the bench. The mechanic leaned in. "Is this the real deal?" Eli unzipped the bag and handed him a 1-page schematic. "That's the internal breakdown. We simplified the filter mechanism, but it still works." The man studied it in silence, then nodded. "I'll prep 5 copies." "You sure about this?" Jack's voice was firm. "It has to get out, even if we don't make it back." The man gave a short nod. "You're doing something dangerous, you know." Jack exhaled. Dangerous would be staying silent. You can't kill an idea that's already gone viral. They stayed the night above the garage. It wasn't much, just 2 cots and a space heater, but it was quiet. Safe. In the morning, 5 boxes sat on the workbench. Inside each was a copy of the prototype, a drive with all their documents, and a letter from Jack explaining Samuel's story. He wrote the same line on every envelope. "This belongs to the children of the world who thirst." They hit the road just after dawn, delivering the boxes to 5 separate drop points. Each one had been chosen for security, for distance, and for trust. Churches, clinics, remote safe houses. By nightfall, all 5 were gone. The last one was left with June. As Jack handed her the final box, she looked up at him, her voice steady. "You did it. You finished it." Jack shook his head. "We only started it. Now the world decides what to do with it." They returned to the cabin under cover of darkness. Grady's cruiser was parked near the creek. Jack gave a wave as they passed. Inside, everything was exactly as they left it, except for a single envelope sitting on the fireplace mantel. Jack opened it slowly. No return address. No name. Just a piece of paper. "You should have stayed quiet." He crumpled it and tossed it into the fire. Eli didn't speak. He just opened his sketchbook and started drawing again. This time he drew 5 children gathered around a small purifier. In the background, mountains rose high, but the cabin stood strong stone walls, smoke curling from the chimney, a warm light in the window. Jack watched him for a long moment, then turned toward the laptop. It was time. He opened the folder labeled Final Release and hit Upload. Photos, videos, test results, diagrams, blueprints, interviews, Samuel's letters, the purifier model, all of it. In one click, the world would know. Jack hovered his finger over the mouse, then looked at his son. "You ready?" Eli nodded. "Let's set it free." Jack clicked. The screen blinked. Uploading. The story of Samuel Whitlow, once buried under decades of dust, fire, and fear, had just been set loose. And somewhere far from the mountains, someone was already dialing a number, their voice cold, their message simple. They've gone public. Back at the cabin, Jack closed the laptop. No celebration, no relief. just the steady hum of truth finally waking up. And tomorrow, the world would answer. The storm rolled in fast, low clouds swallowing the sky, thunder murmuring in the distance like a threat getting closer. Jack stood on the porch of the cabin watching the forest sway under the first lash of wind. His phone buzzed in his hand again and again. Emails, calls, messages. They were coming in faster than he could read them. The story had gone live just 10 hours ago, and already it had reached farther than Jack had dared imagine. The article, penned by Alina Voss and headlined, "The Man Who Tried to Save the World and Was Erased for It," sat at the top of every major news site. Photos of the purifier, excerpts from Samuel's journals, scans of the blueprints testimonials from June and Martha, and a video of Eli explaining the machine to a room full of skeptical scientists. All of it out there, all of it undeniable. Jack's inbox had exploded with requests. Universities, nonprofits, tech labs. Some were reaching out to help. Others wanted interviews. A few were already dissecting the blueprints, offering modifications, proposing enhancements. Hope was spreading. But so was fear. Down the driveway, Sheriff Grady stood outside his cruiser, arms crossed, watching the tree line. He hadn't said much since the article dropped. Didn't have to. His jaw was tight. His radio had picked up strange chatter all morning, military tones, encrypted bursts. "Something's coming," he muttered. Jack nodded. "Yeah, I can feel it." Eli stepped out onto the porch, holding his sketchbook. "It's happening, isn't it?" Jack looked at him, and for a moment he saw the kid who'd slept in the back of his pickup 3 weeks ago. Thin, hopeful, quiet. And now the kid was standing in the middle of a global storm of truth with nothing but courage and pencil lead in his hands. Jack placed a hand on his son's shoulder. Everything's changing now. Inside the cabin, the purifier sat on the table, clean and humming softly. Jack had made final adjustments that morning. The prototype now ran off a basic hand pump and gravity-fed tubing. It didn't need electricity, didn't need fancy filters, just water, any water. And it worked. It was tested live on camera the night before. Jack had scooped a bucket of muddy creek water, poured it into the device, and within minutes, Eli held up a clear glass of clean drinking water. That clip had gone viral within hours. Some headlines called it the machine that could end water poverty. Others were less kind. Hoax or hero. The $1 lie. But it didn't matter. The design was open source now. It couldn't be buried again. Still, Jack knew that exposure came at a cost. That cost arrived just before dusk. A dark SUV pulled up on the far edge of the driveway. Grady's hand went to his sidearm. The doors opened. 2 men stepped out. Black suits, no badges, no IDs. But their postures screamed authority, the kind that doesn't wait for permission. Grady moved fast, placing himself between them and the cabin. "This is private property," he said. "You're not welcome." The taller of the two smiled, ignoring the sheriff completely. He looked at Jack. "Mr. Bennett, we'd like to talk." Jack stepped down from the porch slowly. "I bet you would." The second man held out a folder. "We're authorized to offer you $10 million for the prototype. Immediate transfer. All rights, all designs. You walk away, your family stays safe, and the world gets what it needs under proper management." Jack didn't take the folder. He didn't move at all. "Let me guess," he said. "And if I say no, we get another bullet on the table." The man's smile didn't change. "We're not here to threaten. We're here to offer peace, and you've started a fire, Jack. We're here to help contain it." Jack's voice was calm but iron underneath. This fire was meant to burn. Everything we need. It was under our feet all along. The second man stepped forward. You don't understand the implications of what you've done. You've opened Pandora's box. Governments will be destabilized. Economies will collapse. Entire industries will crumble. Jack raised his chin. Good. The man faltered. Excuse me, if those industries only survive by letting children die of thirst, then let them crumble. The taller man sighed. We're not asking again. From the porch, Eli called out, Dad, camera's rolling. A small red light blinked beneath the cabin's eave. A security feed live, streaming, connected directly to Alina's backup servers. Jack smiled slightly. You're not the only ones who came prepared, he said. The two men glanced at each other. The tension shifted. Then they turned, climbed into the SUV, and disappeared down the drive without another word. Grady let out a breath. That could have gone worse. Jack nodded. Yeah, but it's not over. By nightfall, the cabin was surrounded by volunteers. Cars arrived from Denver, Boulder, even Wyoming. Engineers, students, doctors. People who'd read the article and wanted to help. Some offered shelter. Others brought supplies. One woman brought a mobile lab. Grady had to set up cones to keep traffic off the road. Eli stood in the center of it all, holding the purifier like a torch. This is what it was for, he said. And Jack realized he was right. The cabin that had once been a forgotten ruin had become something else entirely. A beacon. By morning, Eli had posted the purifier's full design walkthrough online with instructions for building it from recycled materials. Dozens of small-scale builds began popping up across the internet. Rural schools in India, remote villages in Kenya, reservations in New Mexico. They weren't waiting for government approval. They were building. Hope wasn't viral, it was multiplying. That night, Jack lit the fireplace again, staring into the flicker of orange and gold. He pulled out Samuel's final journal. The last page read, I buried it so they couldn't steal it. But I always knew someone would find it. If you're reading this, build it, share it, protect it, and teach the children how. Jack whispered the words aloud, voice cracking. Outside, Eli laughed with a group of college kids as they assembled a second purifier on the porch. Grady walked up behind him. You gonna be okay? The sheriff asked. Jack nodded. We're not running anymore. Grady patted his shoulder. Good. Because I think the world just changed. And it had. But Jack also knew what came next. The invention was free now, but so were the enemies it had made. Tomorrow, someone would try to discredit them, sabotage the plans, sue them into silence. But tomorrow didn't matter tonight. Tonight, the mountain air was clear. The cabin was warm. And for the first time in a long time, Jack Bennett wasn't just surviving. He was building something that could last. Rain came down in sheets the next morning, drenching the trees, soaking the ground, and turning the trail to the cabin into a slippery mess of mud and pine needles. Jack stood in the open doorway, coffee steaming in his hands, his eyes fixed on the distant ridgeline. He wasn't looking for anything in particular. He just needed to know what the world felt like now that it had shifted. The porch was full camp chairs, sleeping bags, gear tarps, tools. People had shown up in droves overnight, not because anyone asked them to, but because they believed in what they'd seen. Mechanics, college kids, nurses, hikers, even 2 retired engineers from Boulder had arrived with soldering kits and a van full of water samples. Inside, the purifier buzzed quietly. It was on its 5th day of uninterrupted use. Eli knelt beside it carefully, assembling a second prototype with one of the engineering students, a girl named Maya, who talked fast and moved faster. They were a perfect match. Jack let out a breath and stepped inside. "You getting close?" he asked. Eli nodded. "It's cleaner than yesterday. We found a way to reduce plastic parts by 70%. Mostly reclaimed aluminum now." Jack knelt beside them. "You think it's ready to scale?" Maya nodded. "If we had a proper lab and some backing, we could run field tests within the month." The moment felt surreal. Just a week ago, they were hiding blueprints under floorboards. Now they were talking about mass production. A knock on the door broke the moment. Grady stepped in, dripping wet, holding a newspaper in a plastic sleeve. "You need to see this," he said. Jack took the paper and unfolded it on the table. The headline read, "Government Denies Existence of Whitlow Device. Claims Story is Dangerous Misinformation." Beneath it was a statement from the Department of Public Infrastructure, calling the purifier a non-validated contraption, lacking scientific rigor, and warning that attempting to replicate or distribute this unapproved device may violate safety regulations and federal patent laws. Jack stared at it in silence. Eli stood behind him, reading over his shoulder. "They're calling us frauds," Maya snorted. "Of course they are. You just exposed half the world's bottled water racket." Jack shook his head slowly. "They can't disprove it, so they discredit it. They'll try to bury it not with bullets this time, but with bureaucracy." Grady looked grim. "And lawsuits. Alina just called. The Gazette's being threatened with injunctions, defamation suits, even espionage charges. It's getting ugly." Jack folded the paper and placed it down. "That means we're winning." Grady raised an eyebrow. "This feel like winning to you?" Jack stood and paced, his mind already spinning. They're attacking the story because they can't control it. They're hoping the noise drowns the signal. But what if it works? Eli asked. What if people stop believing? Jack turned to face him. Then we speak louder. Over the next 48 hours, the response came hard and fast. 3 major news outlets ran counter-articles questioning Samuel's identity, implying the purifier was a modern hoax tied to a fringe survivalist movement. One anchor even laughed on air, calling it a glorified camping gadget with a messiah complex. Jack didn't waste time arguing. Instead, he sent out a call, and the world answered. Videos began pouring in from villages across the globe, places where people had built the purifier from recycled parts using nothing but Jack and Eli's schematics. Kids drinking clean water from filthy streams. Elderly women holding up glasses to the camera crying. Clinics reporting drops in waterborne infections. Schools with working units in every classroom. Alina ran a new headline the next morning, proof of impact. When the people build what governments deny. The story spread again, this time faster than before. The louder the resistance got, the louder the truth roared back. By the 3rd day, Maya and her group had fully built 10 purifiers. They packed them into a donated van and drove to an Appalachian community suffering from poisoned groundwater. The video of kids there drinking clean water hit 5 million views in one day. But it wasn't all triumph. On the 4th night, someone sabotaged the workshop tent behind the cabin. Tools were stolen. 2 half-finished prototypes smashed. No one saw who did it. Grady doubled security. June arrived that evening with a duffel bag full of journals and a hard drive backup of every message Samuel had ever left her. She sat with Jack by the fire and stared into the flames. "You know they're not going to stop, right?" she said. Jack nodded. "Neither are we." June turned to him. There's one more thing Samuel left behind, but he didn't leave it for the world. He left it for you. She handed Jack a sealed envelope. It was thick, heavy, wax-sealed with the initials SWO. He opened it slowly. Inside was a letter, handwritten, dated months before Samuel's disappearance. If someone ever finds this and they carry the heart to finish what I could not, then they must also know the cost. There are always those who will trade truth for comfort, justice for profit, and water for power. But the machine is not what matters. The machine is just a tool. The real purifier is the soul that refuses to turn away. If you are reading this, then I ask you, be that soul. Jack read the words twice, then a third time. He didn't say anything for a long moment. Then he handed the letter to Eli. You should read this too. Eli's eyes moved slowly over the page. When he looked up, something new burned behind his expression. Resolve. The next morning, Eli stood in front of 3 news cameras and delivered a speech unscripted, honest, and unwavering. We're not trying to sell anything, he said. We're not asking for permission. We're just doing what people should have done 100 years ago, sharing something that saves lives. If that makes us dangerous, then maybe this world needs more danger. The clip aired on primetime news. It lit a fire. Kids across the country started building purifiers as school projects. Teachers added Samuel Whitlow's story to their lesson plans. A nonprofit offered to fund 1,000 units for disaster zones. But behind the scenes, Jack could feel the pressure rising. June warned him of increased surveillance. Grady reported strange vehicles parked near the edge of town. Maya's lab in Boulder was broken into. Nothing taken, just warnings left behind. And then the call came. Alina's voice on the other end was strained. They've issued a federal order, she said. You're being summoned to Washington for a closed-door inquiry. Jack said nothing. They're scared, Alina added. But that doesn't mean they'll play fair. Jack hung up and looked around the room. At Eli, at Maya, at June, at the team of strangers who had become something like a family. He stood slowly. They want to question me, fine. Let them. He walked to the window and looked out at the rain-slicked forest, the place that had once swallowed him whole and now carried his voice across continents. Jack turned back to the group. It's time we stop surviving. Now we confront the system face to face. The system only fears what it can't silence. It will build on Chapter 10 and directly lead into the final chapter. Please hold for the full text. The Capitol was colder than Jack expected. Not the weather, though. It was gray and unforgiving, but the building itself, its walls, its lights, the stares from every suited official as he stepped inside the hearing chamber. Cold like steel, cold like judgment. He adjusted his blazer as the doors swung open, and a sharp voice echoed, Mr. Jack Bennett, please take your seat. The room wasn't massive, but it was intimidating. Half-moon seating lined with men and women in dark jackets, nameplates in front of each. Cameras mounted on tripods clicked into position. Staffers scribbled notes. The seal of the United States gleamed on the wall behind the central podium. Jack walked calmly to the microphone. Eli, June, and Alina sat in the gallery behind him. Eli gave him a subtle nod. Jack didn't smile back. He was focused, tired, but ready. The chairwoman, a woman in her 60s with a severe expression and a sharper tone, adjusted her glasses. Mr. Bennett, you are here today to answer for the unauthorized release of unverified, potentially hazardous technology to the public as well as your role in aiding the illegal distribution of said technology internationally. Do you understand the charges under review? Jack leaned toward the mic. I understand you're trying to criminalize Hope. The room stirred. Someone cleared their throat too loudly. The chairwoman frowned. You'll refrain from dramatics, Mr. Bennett. This is a formal inquiry. Jack nodded once. Understood. They began reading statements introducing exhibits, documents, photos, even a grainy satellite image of the cabin. A large screen lit up behind him showing one of the purifier prototypes being assembled by children in a South African village. This, one of the panelists said, is not regulation. This is recklessness. Jack turned slowly. That's clean water. Would you prefer we'd waited for permission to save lives? Another panelist leaned forward. No one is questioning the intentions, Mr. Bennett. We're questioning the consequences. Your actions have sparked a global reaction that may undermine years of diplomatic and economic stability. Jack held his ground. Then maybe your stability was built on people staying sick. The system only fears what it can't silence. The room went quiet. For a beat too long. The chairwoman exhaled. Mr. Bennett, are you aware of the repercussions your statements may have on international partnerships, government contracts, and corporate interests? I'm aware, Jack said. I'm also aware that 400 kids in Arizona drank clean water this week because of something Samuel Whitlow built in a shack in Colorado. Mr. Whitlow was a conspiracy theorist, one senator said. He was a veteran, a scientist, and a man who gave up everything so no one would own what should belong to everyone, Jack fired back. The tension sharpened like wire. Alina stood in the back, slowly unfolding a folder. The moment was coming. The chairwoman rubbed her temples. And yet you chose to take a confidential discovery and release it to the world without oversight, without testing, without clearance. Jack tilted his head. Without delay. Do you have any evidence that lives have been saved as a direct result of this machine? Jack didn't answer. Alina stepped forward from the gallery, handed a flash drive to the panel clerk, and whispered something. The clerk inserted it into the system. The screen lit up. A video began to play. A woman stood in front of a collapsed shelter in Haiti, clutching a baby. The water we had was killing us, she said, in Creole subtitled below. Then someone brought this little blue machine. Now my baby drinks clean water every day. He stopped coughing. Next clip. A headmaster in Malawi. The purifier saved our school. Then a rural firefighter in New Mexico. We used it after the pipeline burst. Nothing else worked. Clip after clip. Dozens. Hundreds. When the screen finally went black, the silence in the room was different. Heavier. Eli sat forward. His hands shook. The chairwoman tried to recover. Anecdotal footage, Jack interrupted, is still proof. It's not theory anymore. It's reality. And what if your invention causes harm in the wrong hands? Jack leaned forward. It's not an invention anymore. It's a movement. The next panelist, Senator Hargrove, Texas, adjusted his tie. So you're saying this is beyond regulation? Jack nodded. I'm saying it's beyond your control. Another pause. Then came a different kind of voice. Soft, precise. A woman from Oregon, younger than most at the table, tapped her pen against her notepad. What do you want? Mr. Bennett, Jack blinked. I'm sorry, she repeated. What do you want? Jack exhaled. I want Samuel's story told truthfully. I want every blueprint, every file, every line of code to remain open and free. I want kids with no access to clean water, to have a tool that can change that. I want this country to stop treating compassion like contraband. And what do you want from us? She asked. Jack looked around the room, then straight into the camera. I want you to step aside if you're not brave enough to stand up. The gallery erupted in low murmurs. Alina raised her phone, already live streaming. The feed numbers surged. Outside the chamber, the public had gathered, hundreds standing in the rain, holding up signs that read, "Purify the truth. Water is a right, and we are the legacy." Volunteers handed out copies of the purifier schematics to anyone who asked. Inside, the panel ended the session abruptly, retreating to private deliberations. Jack stepped away from the microphone, his legs weak, but his resolve firmer than ever. Eli met him at the exit. "You crushed that," he whispered. Jack half smiled. "Didn't feel like crushing. Felt like surviving." "No," Eli said. "It felt like leading." They stepped outside together. Rain slicked the marble steps. Umbrellas covered the crowd like a sea of shields. Cheers erupted as Jack and Eli emerged. Jack paused on the final step. The press surged forward. "Mr. Bennett, do you fear arrest? Do you plan to shut the movement down? Have you spoken with any foreign governments?" Jack raised his hand. The crowd hushed. "I didn't come here to fight," he said. "I came here to protect something precious, something all of us deserve. And no matter what happens next, we're not going away." He stepped down, surrounded by people now, not just followers, but builders, believers, engineers, students, survivors. He walked through the crowd, not as a fugitive or a renegade, but as something else, a messenger who had delivered the truth and refused to let it be buried again. Behind him, Eli turned his phone screen toward the camera. The purifier schematics were now translated into 15 languages. The world wasn't waiting anymore. And as they disappeared into the crowd, a storm still brewing, a shadow watched from an unmarked car across the street, speaking quietly into a headset. "They're not backing down." Static. Then a reply. "Neither are we." On a dry hillside outside Santa Fe, where the land cracked like aged pottery and water came in tanks once a week, a little boy named Mateo turned the crank on a purifier built from scrap. The water that trickled out was clear, cold. He cupped his hands and drank slowly, as if tasting hope for the first time. His mother watched with quiet reverence. Around them, more families gathered, each holding makeshift containers, empty bottles, rusted cans. The purifier stood like a small altar in the dust-painted blue, rimmed with handprints of the children who'd helped install it. This was one of hundreds now, one of thousands. And it had all started in a forgotten cabin in Colorado. 6 months had passed since the hearing in Washington. 6 months of chaos, resistance, and reckoning. But also 6 months of momentum. They never did arrest Jack Bennett. The inquiry had stalled, turned inward, and eventually dissolved under pressure from public backlash. Lawsuits were threatened but quietly dropped. Corporate lobbyists redirected their energy elsewhere. The world had moved not because Jack forced it, but because too many others refused to stay still. The purifier designs lived on the blockchain now, free, immutable, replicated, translated into every major language and most minor ones. They appeared on phones, in textbooks, inside prison walls, and on refugee camp posters. Wherever water was poisoned, scarce, or stolen, someone was building one. At the cabin, things had changed too. What was once a silent refuge had become something else entirely. A community lab, a retreat center, a school. Volunteers came to learn, to tinker, to build. Eli taught daily classes under the pines. Children listened to him explain not just how the purifier worked, but why it mattered. He told Samuel's story without bitterness, only gratitude. The bitterness had burned away. Maya led a team that now coordinated builds in 20 countries. They worked out of a refurbished train depot outside Denver, where crates of parts came and went like clockwork. Alina had written a book, Blueprints of Truth. It was part memoir, part investigative chronicle, part open letter to a broken system. It hit the bestseller list in 2 weeks and was banned in 4 countries the following month. Jack. He stayed mostly quiet. He worked with his hands, installed solar panels, taught welding to kids who'd never held a tool before. Some days he didn't speak at all, letting the sound of wind in the trees fill the silence where anger used to live. But he watched. He watched the world shift, not all at once, not in some utopian wave, but in pieces, in stubborn pockets of change. And he knew that was enough. One afternoon, Eli found him in the workshop, fixing a cracked intake valve. Grady called, Eli said. He says someone's trying to name a bill after Samuel. Jack looked up. What kind of bill? Water equity? Infrastructure funding for purifier programs? Jack raised an eyebrow. That'll stir the pot. Eli shrugged. Good. Some pots need stirring. Jack smiled faintly. He'd have hated the attention. Yeah, Eli said, chuckling. But he'd have loved the result. They finished in silence. That evening a storm rolled in, gentle and slow. Rain fell on the cabin's tin roof like a steady heartbeat. Jack sat by the fireplace, watching the flames move. He held Samuel's last journal in his lap. He'd read it a dozen times. Still, he opened it again. Flipping through the pages, he paused on one line he hadn't noticed before. If truth is a river, then courage is the dam that breaks. Jack whispered it aloud. The words hit different now. They didn't ache. They rang. Later that week, he was invited to speak at a global summit on humanitarian innovation. He almost declined. Crowds weren't his thing. But Eli urged him to go, so he did. He stood on a glass stage in front of 1,200 people, most in suits, some in uniforms. Cameras watched. Lights pulsed. Jack didn't use a teleprompter. He didn't clear his throat. He just started talking. I'm not a scientist. I'm not a politician. I didn't build this to win awards. I helped finish something a better man started. A man who died alone because the truth was inconvenient. He paused. But the truth doesn't go away just because it's buried. The truth has roots. He held up a small purifier, lightweight, made from bamboo and recycled aluminum. This is a seed, not a product, not a patent, just a seed. Give it water and it gives you water back. He looked into the crowd. You want change? Don't ask for it. Build it. Share it. Stand in front of it if you have to. He stepped back, and the room, after a moment's stunned silence, rose to its feet. When he returned to the cabin, it was snowing. Eli was waiting by the fire, sketching again. What did you draw this time? Jack asked. Eli flipped the sketch pad around. It was a map. Not of geography, but of connections. Lines between cities. Dots where purifiers now existed. Handwritten notes beside them. Nairobi? 14 installed. Detroit? 6 functional. Jakarta? Testing rain catch integration. Jack stared. Eli said softly, We didn't just change the world. We connected it. They sat together warm despite the cold. Outside, snow fell on the hills. Later that night, Eli posted a final message on the page that had launched it all. To anyone reading this, the machine works. But what matters most isn't the machine. It's the people who keep it alive. Don't wait for someone else. You are someone. The post was shared 1.6 million times in 3 days. Somewhere in Argentina, a teacher built a purifier using bike parts. In Cambodia, a grandmother made one from a rice cooker and 2 glass jars. In Detroit, a middle school built 6 for a neighborhood that had lost running water. And back in Santa Fe, Mateo cranked his purifier again, not because he had to, but because it felt like magic. Water poured into his tin cup. He smiled, and drank Jack would never be famous. That wasn't the point. The point was a cabin once lost to fire now pulsed with light. A blueprint once buried now lived in a billion hands. A boy once afraid to speak had helped ignite a movement. And the message, simple, defiant, human, would outlive them all. The truth cannot be owned. Water belongs to everyone. And when we stop waiting for permission to care, the world changes. Not all at once, but forever.